welcome to the L1011. What are we going to be covering in today's video? Well, first of all, we're going to take a look at the history of the L1011, which there's a lot to cover there and it is a fascinating aircraft. Then we're going to be loading into the sim on stand 16 Bravo in JFK, where we're going to take a look at the exterior features, the interior features, and generally just the aircraft itself as an overview. Then we're going to get the engine started and do a short flight from JFK, and then we'll return back to JFK looking at some of these cool features in flight and just going over the aircraft's general systems. Okay, the history of the L1011 is fascinating. I think it's one of the most interesting wide-body aircraft ever built. Now, why is that? It's because it's a Lockheed. It's not an Airbus, it's not a Boeing, and it's not a McDonnell Douglas Corporation aircraft. It's its own thing entirely. Lockheed were on top of the world in this period. They had just finished the SR-71. Not that they could tell anyone about it, but they were there with that level of expertise and they thought, let's show everyone what we can do with airliners. They'd built airliners before in the past that had been successful, but this was their first and last jet airliner, unfortunately. Production started in 1968, first flight in November 1970, and it was introduced in April 1972. 250 aircraft were made, so, quite a few, but because of this sort of a need to show everyone, look what we can do, they needed to make 500 units just to break even, so they didn't even come close. Now, what did they do to try and differentiate the L1011 from the DC-10? It had autoland, so it was the first wide-body aircraft to have autoland. It had 4 hydraulic systems, direct lift control, which we'll look at later in the sim, really sturdy construction. So people who worked on the L1011 said it was just beautifully made, like really, really strong. At the rear, it had an SDuct, which meant that the engine was lower down, so in case of an engine failure, it was much better to fly on the takeoff roll. And it even had stairs in the lower that you could kind of load into and go into a lower lounge area. Now, speaking of that SDuct, connected to that was the Rolls-Royce RB211, another pro and con of the L1011. Why? So Lockheed really hitched their horse to Rolls-Royce in this period. The RB211 was, you could call it a next generation engine, so it's got N1, N2 and N3 still used in Rolls-Royce engines today, and loads of other innovative features that made it remarkably fuel efficient and powerful, but it was delayed to the point that it caused Rolls-Royce to go bankrupt. And that caused even further delays on the program, putting it behind the DC-10. When it came into service, it was a fantastic engine, but unfortunately those delays were critical because it meant that it entered service after the DC-10 and lost out onto that contract with American Airlines, where they were looking for an aircraft that was not quite as big as the Jumbo, but more fuel efficient than older generation aircraft. This leads us to the Dash 500 variant. Now, this is the variant that we are simulating. They had more powerful RB211 engines, a much longer range of 5,000 nautical miles, and to do that has got a little bit of a shorter fuselage and a higher maximum takeoff weight. They also adjusted the wing a bit, made it a bit wider, changed the wing root box, and its first flight was 1978. So if you hear me talking about the L1011 and showing it in sim, we're talking about the Dash 500 variant. Now, let's take a look at that Dash 500 variant in the sim. Okay, welcome to stand 16 Bravo in JFK. Let's start this walk around of the L1011. One thing you might notice straight away is how far back the nose wheel is as compared to, let's say a Jumbo or a 7.3 or something you might more be used to looking at. It's actually because of the tri-jet configuration. So MD-11 and DC-10 are similar. It's because a lot of the weight is shifted to the rear. It means that the nose wheel and everything kind of gets shifted backwards a bit, and that makes it quite unique to taxi. Speaking of the front of the aircraft, if we take a closer look at this nose, now I think the nose of the L1011 looks really rather modern. If you kind of just take it and kind of get rid of that sort of tri-jet at the back, you could convince me that this is an aircraft maybe 10 or 15 years newer than it actually is. It kind of looks like a big 7.6, massive windows, great visibility, and that sleek aerodynamic look. Obviously, looking aerodynamic and being aerodynamic, two different things, but still, I think it looks great. Moving up close to the front, you can start to see some of this detail that's on there. As always, everything is decaled, so when you get close up to it, it doesn't lose that clarity. You've got high quality pitot tubes here, knacker ducts inlets for the air system, and also moving towards this nose gear we're just talking about, you can see just great detail all over it. All over you can see the ridges in the tyres, everything like that, and all the hydraulic lines leading up. We can even go inside the bay here, and there's just sort of no loss of detail. We can even read the decaled instructions in there. Looking across the side here, you've got the first look at one of these doors. Now the doors, so door one right, one left, and leading backwards, I'm not going to say they're unique to the L1011, because I know the 7.5 and 7.6 went on to use similar, but they're not like you might expect. They disappear up into the fuselage. So quite a futuristic style design, quite nice actually as well, when you consider operation for the crew was relatively simplified and kind of fitting with that. We're going to make the best airliner in the world. We're even going to have the best doors. they just went for it with this aircraft. Moving to the wing route, as we said, we're doing the 500. One of the improvements with the 500 was a refined aerodynamic wing box here, and also a larger wingspan slightly. So this is a slightly more modern, but you're talking early 60s or mid 70s, so it's not a modern wing by today's standards, but still with the landing lights in there that you can see, of course, are 3D and kind of have their own unique little outlook there. This is our first look at the RB211s that we were talking about earlier. Now, they are a legendary engine. Like, we touched on it, that they obviously made the company go bankrupt, which, not ideal, but that's not because they were bad, it's because they were just so pushing the boat out on what was possible, and they stayed in service for decades and decades. I mean, powering everything. I'm not going to say every aircraft, of course, that's ridiculous, but every sort of major aircraft you can think of probably could also be fitted with the RB211s, and they all started because of this aircraft. And you could make a strong argument of, without the L1011, you wouldn't have the RB211, and you wouldn't have Rolls-Royce. So again, that's why I say this is one of the most interesting and important wide-body aircrafts ever built. Moving along, you've obviously got the standard sort of slats and flaps here. They're quite large. It's not got a dialer flap system, but there are more flap settings than you would say in an Airbus. And you can see this sort of rake wingtip here with lights similar, I'm going to say it, to the A300. So a little bit of A300, A310 sort of vibes coming through there. Let's take a moment to pause and talk about that SDuct. And I want to go into a little bit more detail why the SDuct is interesting / why did they bother. Now, when you look at a DC-10 next to this aircraft, the most striking thing, at least for me, is the engine is kind of in a pod like this, and then the rudder is sat on top of it with a bit of, kind of looks like a pylon connected it to the fuselage. It kind of looks like someone went, oh, we've got to add a third engine on this. Oh, no, just stick it between the rudder. Whereas this looks like a lot more of a unified design. I know that wasn't the case with the DC-10, but it's kind of what it looks like. And here you can see, so let's move further to the back, this is where the engine is. So the engine isn't up there, it's actually down here. Now, why did they bother doing that? It's obviously a huge amount of work, which obviously probably made the aircraft get even more delayed than it was beforehand. Now, they did this because, let's say we're going down the runway. Boom, we have an engine failure. Now, we're used to these underslung engines here and here, that when we have an engine failure, not a huge amount happens that is unexpected. We get the yaw, we get V1, rotate, and off we go. Now, with an engine that's all the way on top of the fin here, or if this was where it actually was, when you get an engine failure, the aircraft's actually going to want to pitch up. So crews of DC-10s and MD-11s, if you had an engine failure at V1, they would have to push the control wheel forward, or at least hold it in position, because the aircraft's going to effectively rotate itself because of that loss of thrust. Whereas on the L1011, because it's in the center of the fuselage, so going down the middle, when you lose that engine, literally nothing's going to happen. You're going to lose some power, there's no pitch moment, nothing like that, and you're just going to safely take off into the air. Again, a more sophisticated solution that cost more and cost more time. But that's in the theme. But it does give a really, really cool look, because I'm trying to think from the top of my head, there isn't another tri-jet like this. I don't believe. There could have been the other ones that I'm not aware of, from Tupolev or Aleutian or something like that, but this is definitely where that sort of idea started. And leading down the back here, just look at the detail on there. Lots of extra plates here, for this is where the APU is located, because obviously it can't be all the way in the tail because there's an engine there already. And it's also where you're going to open up and get access to the engine because it's embedded in the tail. So from a maintenance perspective, not great, but cool. Coming to the main landing gear, not actually that innovative, just sort of standard landing gear. You can see the brake disc here, but just taking that detail. I know I won't push the point too much, but you know, we're going to go up here and we can read absolutely everything. And again, this side is just a mirror of the other side, so nothing too crazy, but we can see inside the rear of the engine here and also along the sides. Go a little bit closer this time to the fan disc just to give you an idea of what that looks like. And then we're back round at the front. Now, I know we mentioned this a little bit in the history section, but some of these aircraft had stairs. Now, these stairs open up on the side and would allow you to get into a lounge where you could relax and get up into the aircraft without having to go via the jet bridge. Now, this really was sort of the golden age of aviation, as they call it, where flying was an event. It's not like we have today. But obviously, with that came the cost of the tickets as well, if you extrapolate forward with inflation. But still, this really was a glamorous time to fly, and the L1011 really amped up that glamour to an extra level, being extra quiet as well compared to its competitors and having all this space. So why don't we move inside and take a look at the cabin now. Welcome to the TriStar's cabin. Now, this cabin is really quite a unique thing. I've put the camera here at about the head height that you would be coming in at for the first time experiencing a TriStar. Now, you might notice there's just enormous amount of space. Remember, this is the first time that you probably would have been on a wide-body aircraft as well. Why is there such a huge sense of space? Now, if you notice, look down the center, there are no overhead lockers. So this aircraft was designed to just have the left side overhead lockers, which kind of slant up and then arch up quite aggressively to give you this really big vaulted ceiling look. Other airline in the period did similar, but the TriStar really built it into its design, because in that period, not as many people checked in bags. A lot of it just all went in the hold. And as we've seen, they've got that unique sort of staircase entrance as well. So they were again thinking ahead of the game. It creates this huge sense of space in here. And even by today's standards, it's just, I would probably walk in here and be like, this is amazing, you know. Along with that, we've also got great level of detail as you get close up to objects. So if I go right up to this seat here, like look, you can just see the textures are super crisp, and that's done by using detail maps. So there's a lot of technology that's available in 2024 that goes into making these cabins just look this good when you get this close. Like look for here, like you've got the fabric here, and I go to this window frame with the plastic covers. If I get super close to it, it really, really looks like plastic. And there's that RB211 just sneaking into view there. Now, I'm going to quite rapidly make my way to the back of the cabin because there's something pretty unique back there. As you can see on the top right, there's the projector. Now, the projector obviously is going to be the main form of entertainment on these flights. No in-flight entertainment in these days. Back-of-seat entertainment was just not a thing at all. Now, while we talk about the doors in the cabin, I'm not going to say they're unique to the Lockheed because I believe the 7.6 and MD-11 had similar doors, but they're still pretty cool. So when you open them, they go up and into the cabin. So what I mean by that is up into the upper part of the fuselage of the cabin area. So they're not an open out door. It's much easier for crews to use and looks pretty futuristic. Imagine coming on this thing in the 60s and seeing that and then walking into that cabin and going, wow, this is a whole nother type of flying, you know. You might wonder why I'm homing in on these toilets at the back, but I have to say this is probably the most unique toilets in the entire aviation industry, even beating the toilets that are underneath the floor sometimes in some airliners. Why is that? Well, this is a carousel of toilets. So this is just an arced carousel, and each of these have got, I'll poke my head through one of these doors. So you can see there's a toilet in there, and there's a toilet in there as well. Now, that in its own right is pretty unique and pretty strange. But the other thing that's very, very strange is when we look above our heads here, we have that SDuct that we talked about earlier coming forward, down, and then exhausting the engine out of the back. So I've actually flown with a few people who've flown on this configuration of aircraft as passengers, and they said it is the loudest toilet in the world. Probably a good use for the toilet, I guess, because the noise levels are not in there that long, but still an extremely unique design that comes with the TriStar, because it's one of the only tri-jets with that SDuct at the back. From back here, you get a good view of the absolute massive size of this aircraft. Even by today's standards, that's a pretty big aircraft. Very comfortable, really to quite good seating pitch, and just loads of space and light everywhere. Speaking of light, the cabin obviously has night lighting available, which looks really good as well. Gives you that sort of that 70s vibe. Well, that about sums up the cabin. So why don't we jump to the flight deck, take a look, and get into actually some of the systems of the aircraft. Welcome to the TriStar's flight deck. What are we going to look at in this section? Well, we're going to be looking at the aircraft as it's now powered up. We've got the APU running, electrical power on, and we're going to go through some of these cool features and some of the cockpit customization you can set up. Then we're going to jump to the engine start, taxi, and takeoff. If you want to do the full setup yourself, you can always go press tab, which will bring up the default EFB, checklists, and you have all of the different checklists through here. We also have a quick start guide, and we also have longer form checklists available as well. So let's close this out and get a look through this flight deck. First of all, you might notice it's absolutely massive, like really big, even by the sort of standards of the day. So let's count how many seats we've got. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full-size seats. And the one on the left side there, it's a pretty cool seat because you're basically looking out of the left side captain's side window as you come into land. Some other just really nice details. Look at this sort of wood effect that you've got. I think it really captures that sort of wood veneer on there. When was the last time that you saw wood in an airliner's flight deck? So, you know, another pretty cool, pretty rare thing. Here you've got, this is similar to the Jumbo if you've seen this. You've got an escape hatch on the top, and this is the little ladder that you would throw out of the side and sort of go down the side of the aircraft. I mean, if you ever have to use that, I don't know how usable that would be, because these windows are fixed in place, so they're kind of like fixed windows, sort of like the 350. Pretty modern actually, kind of the way that airliners have gone in the long range, long term. Spinning around this side, more details as well. We've got the flight engineers panel, and the flight engineers panel being, I think, quite well laid out. You've got a lot of information, a lot of gauges, a lot of things like this, but you know, it's broken down into its electrical engine status. Then we've got fuel system, and up here we've also then got the bleed, fire controls, cabin pressurization, and the hydraulic system. And we mentioned it earlier. Look at this. 4 hydraulic systems. Not 3, not 2, but 4. This thing ain't going to have a hydraulic failure. If it does, you've got 3 left. So another really great piece of redundancy on there. Now, the bleed and hydraulic system are actually using the new 2024 dynamic system. Now, this is interesting. So how this system works is the simulator is actually seeing how much fluid and how much pressure you have in all the different actuators, valves, and all this sort of stuff. So ailerons, when they fail, will upfloat and things like this, and you'll also end up with lower pressure in certain accumulators, and it's all going on behind the scenes that you can see on this debug screen now, and that's all going on behind the scenes, but pretty cool as well. Same with the bleed system. So moving forwards on the flight deck, fairly conventional. We're going to take a look at the flight bag later on in the video, so park your curiosity for the moment, but we will come to look at that. You know, nothing crazy here, kind of the standard 6-pack instrument gauge, weather radar on the bottom left, and then top right you've got the ACF modes. This is like your FMA, so it will show you what your autopilot modes are, and a TCAS that is quite commonly retrofitted to this era of aircraft, so almost identical to the A300s, and you have a flight control mechanical synoptic there, which is again fairly similar. Now, what isn't fairly similar is what we're looking at here. Now, this is 2, 1, 2, so top left, top right, and bottom here. Those are independent Lytton INSs. Now, they're fully simulated, so it's not a GPS that's faking to be an INS, it is a true INS. So you can load the waypoints in, you can scroll through them to their maximum limit, you can get the offside one to sort of do calculations as well. It's a proper simulation. Below that is something called a CDU, so a control display unit, also linked to something called the PMS, the Performance Management System. What does all that mean, and why should you care? Well, this is the very, very early days before you had what we know as an FMS now, or an MCDU. So this is the interface to the computer, and it can do some pretty cool stuff if I keep it at a high level of what it's doing. So when you're flying this sort of aircraft, your climb performance, your cruise performance, your sort of takeoff stuff, it's all hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tables. If you've ever looked through one of these manuals, it's just endless. And that would be the flight engineer's job, to go through this, calculate it, and the flight crew will cross-check it and make sure it's accurate. But it can be quite easy to make the wrong call, or go in the wrong column, or also just not be doing that calculation all the time. So what they did was they effectively stuck all of these tables in a digital form and put it into an interface. So here it's going to tell you what should your EPA be. And you can see that the gross weight and fuel, I typed those in. So for example, when you click on here, you can see it puts the interface with £440,000, insert, and that's where it gets the weight from. So you start with the time in Zulu, gross weight and fuel, and the outside air temperature is standard temperature. And we can start to see some of this data that's valid for takeoff. Now, if we want to go through the different phases, we can go through the forward phase. So we've got flight setup, 3-engine cruise, descent optimizations. Now we can see here it's given our climb speeds, so Mach 0.82 eventually, and it's calculated our optimum flight level is flight level 350, and it has a few other pieces of information here as well. This isn't a full tutorial on this, it's just sort of an overview. 3-engine cruise, we can see our cruise speeds, we can see fuel optimum again, step climbs, top of descent. It has a very rudimentary form of VNAV in there, but it can do it, and en route descent, and then eventually we move through to landing data. Now, a lot of this is populated in flight as you go along, but you can scroll through these different phases here, and eventually we should end up back on the takeoff. Now, this physical unit was actually fitted to L1011s, of course, but there's different variations of them, and we've put them together into this unit here. Now, continuing on the theme of navigation, we've got a fair few choices that you want. So we can start off with RadNav. Now, RadNav, that just means I'm going to go fly my L1011 VOR to VOR, conventional navigation, and I'm happy as that. So it's sort of like an old school airliner. Fine. Then you've got INS. Now, INS will bring in the 1, 2, 3 INSs with the 2 CDUs and the PMS system, because they're sort of coupled together, because they also feed into the auto flight system. So this is kind of, I would call it the most traditional setup that you would expect to see. Then you can have GPS. Now this removes all the INS, you've still got RadNav of course, and adds in a Garmin GPS on the glare shield. Now the L1011s did actually fly around with Garmin GPS units on the glare shield, as you've seen here. That gave them RNP capability. So it's not something that's just magically been stuck up there. They did fly around with that, and it did give them some more capabilities. And you can also have the full shebang of the GPS plus the INS plus all the other stuff. So this would sort of be your most capable version. If we go back to INS, we're now going to put the map display screen on. Now, what is this? Now, this screen here was a physical unit that was fitted to, I believe it was Saudi's L1011s, but wasn't ever used, or was used for a short period of time. It's kind of difficult to get information on it, but it was INOP most of its life, so that's why we have the INOP sticker on there. But what we've repurposed it for, only if you select it in the EFB, if you don't want this, you don't have to have it, is when you're loading your INS waypoints in from SimBrief, because you can actually load a SimBrief flight plan into here, it will show you the INS1, INS2, INS3, INS4 up to INS9, so all the different waypoints, and you can batch import them and just send them to your INS unit. So you can fly using the real INS, but with this sort of slightly easier interface of loading the flight plans in and batch them in and sort of keep track of your flight on there. But if you don't want to do that because you want to be a purist and fly it just like the real thing, not a problem at all. You just simply select it off and it won't come back, and you can just use it as you normally would. Well, there are so many things in this flight deck though to go over. We've got the pitch control, we've got the yoke and control wheel as well. The trim wheel's quite funny. It's kind of like a roller index, so it rolls up and rolls down. It's not a stab trim, quite like that. It's an interesting one. The size of the flight deck, again, even by here, by the pedals, it's just enormous. 3 engine controls, fairly standard flap and slack control, and fairly standard trim as well, with radios and everything else that you would expect. So what we're going to jump to now is just going to jump to the pushback, and we're going to be starting the engines ready for our taxi out. Okay, here we are pushed back and ready to start the engine. Now, the sequence of engine start is normally 2, 1, 3, so center engine, left and then right, with the left and right engine done by cross bleed, but we're actually just going to start them all from the APU in a simplified procedure way. Like I say, refer to the manual if you want to follow this through as per you would on the engineers panel, but we're just going to be focusing on the sounds and the start itself. So we've got everything set up behind us, so actually starting the engine is fairly simple. We've got the engine start on both or A or B, we're just going to use B, and then we're going to go start valve open, so we get valve open. And now we want to check down at the engine itself. So like I say, it's the center engine. You can see here is the N3. Remember we said these RB211 engines have N1, N2 and N3. We can slowly see the N1 increasing because it's being spun by the N2, which is spun the N3. And when we get to 25%, which is around about, it's close enough, let's get to max motor, fuel on, so the fuel's been introduced. And we can see light off. Now, let's just take a moment to listen to some of these sounds from the exterior for the engine start. Okay, so we've reconfigured the bleeds and now we're ready to start engine number 1. So let's check that out. So now the center engine is feeding into the left engine with a cross bleed. We can also see we're getting that N3 starting up now, and we're going to start the other engine in sequence. And now we're going to listen just for some of that engine sound from the cabin and light off, and generally just how they sound. Okay, for the after start actions, now I just want to show a few things that you can do it. Obviously you can do it manually, that's absolutely fine, but you can come to the flight bag here and we actually have an autocomplete option. So you can simply say autocomplete. So this is something where you can hear all the items being done automatically, sort of as if you've got a flight engineer. And here you can also choose the panel stage to jump to that point as well. But this is where you can do each phase if you don't want to, or double check that everything's been done. So you can click autocomplete and it will do those items for you from there. So that's how I've used that. So now we are ready to taxi. Let's make sure that we've got our nice charts up. We know where we're going, so we're going to go to 13 left and then take off. So let's release the parking brake and we're ready to go. So obviously we're going to need quite a bit of power to get sort of moving. So there we go, around 30-40%, maybe a little bit less. Yeah, that's enough just to get moving. And it's a big aircraft, right? So it's going to need a fair bit of power to get rolling. And I can sort of feel the aircraft underneath me now. So we're going to be going on the first... let's take the second right because I want to be a bit non-standard. Let's go there. Flight model wise as well, the L1011 uses all the new stuff from 2024. So you've got the fuselage overlay, using all the new ground friction and ground handling as well. So this makes sure that you have all the latest suspension geometry. So if I brake now, you can kind of see, similar to our other aircraft, that you've got a lot of movement in the suspension and movement in the undercarriage, just as you would in the real aircraft, these sort of micro adjustments and a better drag profile, along with having some of the flight controls mapped as well. I actually need to keep a bit of a better eye rather than keeping the power coming up all the time. Okay, here we are lining up with runway 13 left. Now I want to talk a little bit about takeoff performance. How do we do it? Now it's pretty simple. We can either put the weight in, put the altitude and the outside air temperature, select the flaps, or we can press sync so it pulls the weight across. We click calculate. Now we get the speeds on our takeoff data card here, but notice how over here they auto-populate as well. And then we can click set bugs and EPA. So now all of our takeoff bugs are set, and all of our EPA takeoff bugs are automatically set as well. So really simple, kind of a nice sort of auto help out, because that's something that the flight engineer would be doing from the table behind and would stick it in front and then you'd be ready to go. Now let's talk about how we line up with the runway. Now remember at the start of the video we said that the nose wheel is really far behind us, so if we started turning now, that's just not going to work, right? We need to keep going, and probably about now, because the nose wheel's over the line, and we start quite a relatively aggressive turn. I think I could have gone even further if I'm honest. And we just keep turning, keep a little bit of power in so we don't come to a stop. Looking good. No rushing in these wide body aircraft. Nice and smoothly, trim the thrust back, come to a stop, and you see we're exactly on the centre line. So you could be even more aggressive, you can go even further than that really. Right, so we've got our bugs are set, flaps are set, trim is in the takeoff range, we're good to go. So we've got our INSs are all set up as well, we'll be using those after departure, so we've got all the route loaded in there and everything else is set. So let's go. Up to stabilised thrust, stable, thrust is set, airspeed's alive. $100 knots, that's checked. V1, rotate, quite a heavy rotation as we get off the ground, keep pitch coming up, gear coming up, and there we go, aiming for about there, nice 2 or 3 degree rotation. We can hear those engines starting to scream. So we're going to come at 1,000 feet, remember, we're going to bring it all the way back to 549, so bringing the thrust back, 0.549, and also bringing the nose down at the same time, a bit more down, bit more down, bit more thrust, trimming the nose, holding about 1,000 feet per minute, and there we go, we're looking good. So we can also now turn the flight directors on and we can put the INS, so we can see we get the INS mode there, and we can go to follow that, start to bring the flaps up one stage, Bring the nose down because we want to accelerate a little bit more. Tiny bit more thrust. There we go, looking good. So we're en route and we're following our little map now. Now put the flaps all the way up. As the spoilers come in, we just get a little bit of a dip. Pull the nose up. Make sure we've got that 549. Still accelerating. And we could now put the autopilot in, but I'm going to wait till we get to our 250 knots, just hand fly it a bit longer. So 250 knots, IAS mode. So now we get the IAS enunciated on here. And we can pitch up with the flight directors as well. We're en route. Okay, now remember how we talked about the PMS. Now what we can do is we can make sure we're on the climb page. So we've got our climb, our maximum flight level of 430, optimum 37, and we've got the EPA. Now I can press TM. Now you see thrust management and our EPA limit of 1.612 is automatically set and pulled from the PMS. So we don't need to get the engineer to call out the tables and set them all manually. It's just going to do it itself, which really is quite modern. That's sort of getting into that flight management system era of things, you know. It's really rather good. Alright, let's take a look back at this map display screen that we can get. So we're establishing the climb now, 320 knots. Let's put the map screen on. So obviously this is always optional. So what we've got here now is we can see this is our route. So this pink dot here is our expected position from the IRS. So this isn't a GPS pulling this. This is where the INS thinks it is, and you can see the waypoints being sequenced as they go through, and you can see the route up until the end of that batch. So these are the different imported waypoints, and these are the ones that are 1 to 9. And you can load the SimBrief waypoints in batches. So once you've loaded one in, you can load the next batch. So it goes 1 to 9, then and all the way along our route. So this is basically like a situational awareness tool if you're using the INS to give a more conventional map-like display. You don't have to use it. Personally, I do like it. And it's not as simple as, oh, this is just a GPS. You might be an idiot like me, where I was trying to learn how to use this, initialized the IRS on the K of KJFK, and was like, why is my route to Miami in the middle of France? Yeah, because I'd initialized the route wrong. So the plane goes, well, I think you're there. I was like, So it's great as a learning tool in the beginning. Now, can you see the aircraft turning? It's turning because we know we're sequencing to that next waypoint. So there we go. So it's now sequencing to that next waypoint. We see the distance that we've got to go, and we see our sort of yaw bar, sort of expected track, and it's going to track along with the INS. Okay, you've joined us in the cruise now, so we're also going to manipulate the time a little bit. As you can see, it's got quite dark. Now, I want to show you some of these lighting controls and also what the night lighting looks like in the cockpit and the cabin. So, quite a lot of controls in the flight deck. You've got some on the left side of the glare shield, right side of the glare shield, also some on the upper overhead, so that's controlling the backlighting for that, and the flight engineer obviously has some of access as well, quite a few on his lower side, with even making the annuncializer bright and dim with this little push button. Quite cool. So what sort of things are you looking at when you pan back? I really think you just get that wide body, just analog cool feel, because you've got the physical gauges, of course they're all 3D, and when you've got some of the splash lighting coming in and the emissives lighting up, gives you a really good balance of performance but also with that sort of natural lighting look. It's just a really cool place to be. Now if we jump back into the cabin, you can see at night it really accentuates that sort of size, that you have that vaulted ceiling, and you've obviously before the days of LEDs, so you've got a lot of incandescent sort of lights, gives that little bit of a softer glow in the cabin, moving all the way back. It's just a really cool place to be as well, you know, looking at the wings on the left and the right. It makes you sort of transport back to that era, sitting there thinking, yeah, I can imagine being in this thing when it was high tech and brand new. Now what we're going to do, we're going to join ourselves back onto the approach to JFK. So we've flown to Miami, done our turnaround, and we're onto the approach, because I want to talk about some of the handling characteristics, and I also want to talk about direct lift control, because it's very interesting. Okay, we're just taking vectors for the approach for ILS runway 22 right back into JFK, but I just wanted to show you this in practice. So this is pretty simple. You put your landing weight in, your landing elevation. Is it dry or is it wet? If you've got the anti-skid, click calculate, and then you get your landing car data. It'll give you your stopping distance in feet, and then you can set, and this will set the bugs, so you have your approach speed set everywhere there. Right, next time you're going to join me on the approach while we talk about direct lift control. Alright, now, direct lift control. What is it? Why do we care? Why is it cool? Well, what it is, it primarily comes from sort of military aircraft, which makes sense when we talked about Lockheed. This was their first and last jet airliner, and they thought, you know what, we're going to do something that we do on military aircraft, or we've been thinking about it to do, and we think it's going to be awesome for airliners. Now, can you see I'm moving the control wheel, and do you see that the spoilers are moving? Now what happens is when you get into the landing configuration, the spoilers on the wing come up to 7 degrees, so they're extended. Now if I pull the nose down like this, the spoilers come out more to initiate that descent down to 500 feet per minute, and then I let go and they go back to the 7 degrees. Now if I want to climb, I pull the nose up and the spoilers go in all the way to 0, see 0 being the maximum. Now the elevator's taken over and I let go and they go back to 7 and it initiates a climb. But do you see how it's very, very stable? Now what are the advantages of DLC? Now DLC makes it very, very smooth on the approach. It also means you can do these sort of micro adjustments like that, and you see how I'm adjusting between 200, 300, 400 feet per minute, and my pitch angle isn't really changing. So you can make these micro adjustments on the approach quicker, because spoilers are quicker than an elevator, moving the inertia, moving the aircraft, reducing the angle of attack, because that's how that's working. Whereas what this is doing, it's shifting the lift profile of the wing up and down rapidly by using spoilers. So it's a smoother, more efficient aerodynamically in terms of how quickly you can change that to the aircraft, and it gives just, apparently it's very pleasant, and it is very pleasant to fly. Now why, you might say, okay, well, that's brilliant, well why doesn't every aircraft on Earth have this? Well, I think this comes from the era of a military contractor possibly overthinking it, because yes, that's very, very nice to have that and to have that smooth sort of flying characteristics, but it obviously adds drag. Now in military aircraft, drag is important, but sort of fuel burn on the approach, it's not really their biggest consideration. But obviously post this aircraft we had the fuel crisis, fuel became more of a factor, and you're purposely putting the spoilers out to 7 degrees on every approach, it's going to burn more fuel than an aircraft without DLC. So I personally think that's why it was not adopted after this. It's extremely cool, and it's a real quirk of the L1011 that we've captured here, but it's something that probably isn't going to ever be seen again. F-18 Super Hornet is actually going to get it integrated into its flight control system, so even today it's considered pretty cutting edge flight control for modern fighters, and you've got it here in an airliner in the 70s. So join me on the approach and we'll show you how you fly the approach with DLC. Okay, here we are on final approach, and we're a little bit high on purpose, so I want to show you now, right? So we're trimmed, we're high, we're coming down at 1,000 feet per minute, and when we start to get back on profile, I'm just going to pull back on the control wheel, so I'm going to push forward now on the control wheel actually, and the spoilers are all made there. So there we go, 3 whites, 1 red. So we're getting back on profile, a little bit of power going to get cut off here. We're just looking out the window, making sure that all looks good. These micro adjustments are being made, but actually there's nothing really going on with the elevator. The direct lift control is taking responsibility for most of it. So now I'm going to pull back up, add some thrust in, and get ourselves stabilized. 500 or 600 feet per minute, there we go, something like that. A bit less. Direct lift control making it nice and easy and smooth. Start to come back on the thrust. Relatively large flare. And we're down. Right, so get the nose down, and we can start to apply manual braking. Aircraft also has auto brakes, of course. You'd imagine it would do, being super advanced aircraft that it was. Right. and then we're going to take the next exit. Okay, we said we were going to talk about the flight bag. We've looked at some of the things in flight in practical applications, but let's just have a quick look through all the different features so you know what you're going to get when you get in the aircraft. We talked about the autocomplete functionality, but just to go over it, you can obviously autocomplete them with the use of a flight engineer, so they will set all the things for you for that phase of flight. Panel states is pretty obvious as well. Aircraft, we can set different settings that we've talked about, so the navigation options, the map display screen, kilos or pounds. Now flight performance, or I should say effect performance modes, if you turn it on, then some of the effects are reduced so that you can get better FPS. So it's just a nice performance option. Third party, this is where you're going to log in to your SimBrief and your Navigraph account if you have them, if you want to use them. Audio makes sense. We can balance our audio settings, put the cancellation on, and have the flight engineer's voice calling out some of the actions for us, because you would have that as well. Ground, I really like this. I think it looks super cool. It looks like one of those explanation diagrams that you got back in the 70s of like, this is here and this is there. So it's all fairly explanatory. You can do the pushback, you can open and close the doors and connect what you need to connect, but it's really cool and stylized. Load sheet, you can do the SimBrief import. So I've clicked it now and that weight was already imported. So if I put the fuel up and then import the SimBrief, you can see it moves the center of gravity around, shows the different weights in all the different tanks, and again looks like one of those cut in half diagram books from the 70s. Really cool. OFP looks like the dot matrix printer, so this is sort of what you might be handed by the dispatcher, showing all the different routes, and it's in that sort of stylized format like it's on paper. Now this is where you would send it to the INS, so this is where it will pull the route, send it to the INS, as we talked about in that section, that it's possible to do that. Takeoff performance we talked about, landing performance we've talked about, charts, pretty logical. You can pin the charts you want, select which ones you want as well, so we can go to APC, all terminals, and it will simply load the chart there. Now, this is the Lido charts, and they will be available to anyone who purchases it, so this is for 2024, coming from the sim. Now, if you want to use the Navigraph charts, you'd have to take Navigraph, and you would require a Navigraph subscription for that. En route, it's pretty self-explanatory. En route map, showing you where you are and tracking your progress. They're fully independent. You have a left and a right, one for the captain, one for the first officer. A few other things I want to cover up before we end the video. So, weather radar. We do have a weather radar for the left and the right, and it's a pretty basic weather radar, but as per the real aircraft, not quite as fancy as you get on modern day jets, but you can adjust the zoom and see where the weather cells are and avoid them as needed. We've also got circuit breakers. So on the overhead and on the back, there are huge walls of circuit breakers, and quite a lot of these are modelled and will obviously have the effect that you would expect in the sim, which is pretty cool. So if you're playing around, you can see like, well, let me pull this part of the electrical system, this part, and as I said, it's using that 2024 dynamic system, so it all comes into where it's all connected together. So it's all interconnected and will have that desired effect, which is super cool to play around with. Well, thank you very much for joining us on this Welcome to the L1011 video. Hope to get your hands on it in the sim soon, and as I always said, this is just scratching the surface. I could have spoken about this aircraft for 3 hours, 4 hours, however long. I could go on for it rather. It's so cool, and I hope you can see that and you pick it up and enjoy it in the sim soon. Thanks very much.